Hello, hello. Angela Wolf here, Brother Brand Ambassador, and welcome to At Your Side Virtually. And we have something so fun today. In fact, I'm so excited. It's her first time on the live, but you've probably seen her before on some of the Brother pages. And we're going to be talking about quilting with Wendy Chow. So say hi, say where you're from. We are live streaming on Brother Sewing, and it's on the Facebook and YouTube pages. I can see all your comments, and I see some of you have already been here. You've been here waiting patiently, and we're so excited. So let's bring Wendy up. Give her a real big brother warm welcome. Hey, Wendy.
Hey, everyone. How's it going? My name's Wendy, and I'm one of the brand ambassadors for Brother. I also design and write quilt patterns, and I am the author of Urban Quilting, and I co-host a quilting podcast called Quilt Buzz. So today I'm going to show you the basics of foundation paper piecing, which is a type of piecing method in quilting. And I'm going to use my Hey Boo bunting project as an example, which is super cute. I hope you can see this.
Oh my gosh, Wendy, that is so cute. I love that.
Thank you. So I'm going to show you the basics of that with the basics of foundation paper piecing, as well as, so on the agenda, I'm going to teach you how to prepare, print your paper templates, as well as read them. And also, of course, how to foundation paper piece. If foundation paper piecing is not your jam and you want to have a quick bunting for your holidays, maybe at Halloween that's coming up next week, which is really quick and it's hard to believe that it's happening next week, or thanks to the holidays. So I have some alternatives that are definitely going to be easier and it doesn't involve foundation paper piecing.
This is going to be very exciting. And Wendy, by the way, I see some of the comments rolling through, and don't forget, you guys can ask your questions. I'll take a break later for Wendy to answer those, but I'm going to let her take it away. But a lot of people, nobody on this show has ever shown paper piecing. So this might be totally new to some people, and this is very exciting. It's something that's a lot of people talk about, but not a lot of people demonstrate. So we're very excited about this, Wendy. I'm going to let you take it away, and I won't interrupt you, but you guys leave your comments and questions, and I'll make sure I stop for her. And I just wanted to let you know this is totally new to a lot of people, and it's going to be so fun.
Well, you guys are going to be the first time students of mine with foundation paper piecing. I've never taught foundation paper piecing, but it's one of the methods that I've gotten to really like over the last year. And foundation paper piecing is simply using paper as a stabilizer. I'm going to zoom in a little bit. Can you see that? So you use paper as a stabilizer in the back, and then, oops, the lighting here is pretty terrible. Anyway, so you see that, and then you're going to see, and then you're going to use that, so use paper as the stabilizer, and then you're going to sew on the template to create weird different angles that you might not necessarily be able to achieve with traditional piecing and quilting. You could also get really small fine details. So like this, like boo goes here, you've got those really cute small little eyes there and that little waving hand. So that's the beauty of foundation paper piecing. And then you can get those weird angles on the lettering as well. So I'm gonna go over to my other camera that focuses on my desk. All right, so when you're preparing your foundation paper piecing templates, so this is a printout of it, you want to make sure that the printer settings are set as 0% at 100% or do not scale. And the reason being is when you start playing around with different scales on the printer, it's going to affect the final size of the project, but more importantly, the seam allowances that allow the accuracy. To ensure that you actually got the sizing correct, a lot of quilt patterns or foundation paper piecing patterns come with this sort of test block for 1 inch. So what you do is you can measure that with your ruler, and look, that's at 1 inch. So you know that you've set the printer settings correctly. My advice is when you are printing your paper templates, is that you print one of them, test it out, make sure that it does measure as 1 inch before you print out all your paper templates. Because if you do print all of them at the wrong size, you basically wasted all that paper. Also, when you are printing your paper templates, and say, for example, you printed it incorrectly, you don't want to reuse that paper because the incorrect outlines can cause confusion on the actual template that you're going to be using. So there is a little bit of wastage when it does come with foundation paper piecing, but personally, I believe that, you know, accuracy and precision and all those little fine details that you get outweigh waste. Sounds really bad. That is foundation paper piecing. In terms of the paper that you use, like usual, like paper for like printing paper is fine. You can get foundation paper piecing paper, which is slightly thinner, but I don't think that's necessary, and they cost a little bit more. And the reason being is once you print on what you saw on the paper templates, you want to then be able to tear it off at the end. So the thicker the paper is, the more difficult that it is going to like be able to tear off the paper when you're done sewing and trimming all your bits. So now we're going to move on to how to read the paper templates. So from the paper templates, they're going to vary a little bit from pattern to pattern, but generally these are sort of the main key elements that you're always going to get. So this dotted line here, as you can see, that is going to be the finished size. And then this outer solid line here is your seam allowance. So it might vary from pattern to pattern in terms of like the solid line here might be a dotted line, or this dotted line here might be a solid line. But generally, those two outer lines mean the same thing. Then with foundation paper piecing, it's a lot like paint by number. So you notice that there's number 1, 2, 3, and 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. And that's the order in which you're going to sew in. So, and then some foundation paper piecing templates, they don't provide that additional information of like what that section covers. So with my templates, I like to provide additional information on what that piece of fabric, or what fabric goes in that section there. So you've got the background, and I've got that background there. One thing you'll notice as well when you're printing out the templates, whatever you print out is going to be the opposite of what you're going to be making. So you can see this letter E, it's printed out backwards, but if you flip it the other way, it's actually the right side, because you're actually sewing on the back side of the template. So that's why whatever you print out is backwards. So don't freak out if it looks wrong, because you're going to sew it the other way around. Okay, so now I'm going to move on to preparing fabrics for your foundation paper piecing templates. So when you're preparing the fabrics for your templates, you want to make sure that the fabric covers that section that you want to cover, which is this, say for example, with section 1. And you want to make sure that that piece of fabric is going to be large enough so there's at least a 1/4 inch overhang. This is terrible drawing here right now, but you need to have at least a 1/4 inch overhang to take into consideration the seam allowance. So for example, if I'm going to cut the fabric for fabric 2, which is the background, I want to make sure that it covers this area, and also it has at least a 1/4 inch overhang to take into account the seam allowance. And what was it? Oh yeah, so basically it's going to, each piece is going to overhang each other. And when you're new to foundation paper piecing, it's okay if it's more than a 1/4 inch. You might want to give yourself some more room. So maybe you might want to have at least 1/2 inch overhang on each part of the sections. That way it gives you room for error, and you're going to be trimming down the excess fabric as you go. And then these lines here is where you're going to be sewing. So this indicates, so you're going to sew section 1 and section 2 with this seam here. And to sew section 3, you're going to be sewing on this line here. And then to attach section 4 to the remainder of the template, you want to sew on this line. All right, so I'm going to grab a different piece. I printed out a clean piece of template to be easier for us to follow. So now that you've printed out your templates, you're ready to go. So you're going to get a pair of non-fabric scissors here, and you're going to cut around the seam allowance guide. So I'm going to cut this, and it doesn't have to be perfect, and I'm going to show you why. So you can make it all really jaggedy. It doesn't matter. And the reason why is, say, once I've done sewing all the pieces onto the template, I'm going to get a ruler and trim this down, which is the fun part. So you're going to make sure that your ruler is aligned with the outer line where the seam allowance is, that solid line, and then you're going to trim it down. And so on. So it'll end up looking like this. Now you can probably be wondering, why do I have like blue painter's tape? It's because sometimes I might have made a mistake and sewn the incorrect seam. So what I do is I carefully use my seam ripper, and without destroying or tarnishing the paper template, I've removed the seams and then carefully piece the template back together. So for example, and also sometimes you might find that as you're sewing, the templates might break. So say, for example, this broke. I'm just going to tape it over here. And the great thing with painter's tape, you can actually sew over it. All right, so I'm going to show you how to prepare the fabrics for this particular template. So we talked about earlier, I'm going to bring this back here. You want to make sure that if you're preparing fabric for section 1, which is here, you want to make sure that it covers this area and at least a 1/4 inch overhang. So I'm going to kind of like eyeball it here. If you want to, you can get your ruler and sort of eyeball it. So let's say it's about like 1.5 to, sorry, 1/4 and a 1 inch and a 1/4 and 2 inches and a 1/4 and a 1/4 big. So I'm going to eyeball it. So with section 1, it's going to be the letter. So I'm going to use this off-white color for that fabric. And then I'm also going to prepare section 2, because that's the next section I'm going to sew, with using this skeleton print, which is really fun. Let's see. So I'm going to also eyeball it and cut this piece. All right. Oh, and make sure that you do press your fabric as well. So I'm going to quickly turn on my iron and my sewing machine, because we're going to hop on our sewing machine in a little bit. So I'm going to turn that on. All right, I'm just going to quickly move my camera so you can see my sewing machine. All right, give me 2 seconds.
All right, while she's switching that, I can see some of your questions coming in. So, hey, by the way, Wendy.
Yes.
Someone had a great question. Is paper piecing the same as, hold on, let me find it here. It was a great question. I think it was, oh yeah, Cindy had a question. Is paper piecing the same as English paper piecing? Are they the same thing? Is that something different?
They're slightly different. So with English paper piecing, that is, you use, that's all like hand sewn together. And you do use paper templates as well to get those shapes.
Okay.
Yeah. But it's all pieced together by hand. All right. So can you see my sewing machine?
We sure can. Wilma says she loves it used painter's tape too, because she uses it for everything.
Oh, I love painter's tape so much. It's so good, especially like when it comes to quilting, even labeling things, because there are so many little bits and pieces when it comes to quilting. All right, so I've got my sewing machine set up. So when you are foundation paper piecing, make sure that the stitch length, can you see that? So it's currently set as 2.5. Can you see that? Is it all good?
We can see that.
Okay, cool. Great. So with your foundation paper piecing, you want to adjust the stitch length anywhere between 1 to 1.5. I personally like to set it as 1.2, but you want to set it the stitch length to be a small one, so that way it creates this perforation, and then you can just easily tear this off. So you see that? It's really fun. That's my favorite part of foundation paper piecing, is when you tear off the bits. And for this particular example, I'm going to be using I'm going to be using a red thread. I lifted up my machine so you can see the red thread, but you can't. I've got my camera angled incorrectly. But yes, I'm using red thread so you know where I'm going to be sewing. So yeah, I'm going to start it. So you cut out your foundation paper piecing template. I've got fabric 1 prepared. So I'm going to flip this over because you're going to be sewing on the back side of the template. And I'm going to put this piece, you want to make sure, and it is hard to tell, but you want to make sure that the wrong side of the fabric is touching the wrong side of the template. So we'll put this here. And you shine on a light source, and you're going to make sure, I don't know if you can see it, but you want to make sure that this piece, this way, you want to make sure that this piece of fabric is covering that section, that letter 1 section, and you want to make sure that there's at least a 1/4 inch overhang around that area, so that that you're taking into account the seam allowance. So if it's like a dark day today, I like to hold it up against the sewing machine light, or you could hold up against like the window. So for this particular example, I'm going to hold it up against the machine. So you can see it's covering that section 1, as well as there's at least a 1/4 inch overhang around that area. So once I've got that in place, you can pin that, or you could use this fancy glue here, and you can glue baste it on there. So I'm going to quickly glue baste it for this purpose. So you do a little dab. Wonderful. You can see what I've just done. So now that I've glue basted it, I'm going to turn my template over, and I'm going to fold it on, I'm going to fold it on this crease line here. So the section that joins, the line that joins section 1 and section 2 together, because that's the line I'm going to be sewing on. So I'm going to fold the template over. See how I've got that crease? So I'm going to flip this template over, so then the bigger side, or section 1, is closest to my body, and then I'm going to pick up the piece of fabric that I prepared for section 2, and it's going to be right sides together. So the right side of this fabric with this, so right sides together, and I'm going to use that crease line as a guide and make sure that the top bit of, or this top edge here of this fabric sits probably about a 1/4 inch above that. And that's going to take into account that 1/4 inch seam allowance. And if you want to make sure that you've done it correctly and that this piece of fabric covers section 2, you can then flip this template over, and you can kind of like sort of audition it and make sure when you fold this back, you can see that section 2 well covers, or this piece of fabric well covers section 2, as well as a 1/4 inch around that outer line. Hope you can see that. Okay, so that looks pretty good to me. I'm going to take it to the sewing machine. So we want to sew on this line here, this line that joins section 1 and 2 together. So I'm going to do that, put my needle down, and I'm going to sew on that.
Hey, Wendy.
Yes,
hey,
I'm
Wendy.
in the
Just real quick. For some reason, the camera was looking at through your hair, so it was focusing on your hair. So just move your head to the right, just a smidge.
Sorry, guys. Maybe I'll tie it up just in case.
Yeah, but your hair looks fabulous, Wendy. No worries.
Okay, thank you. I really need to wash it today. All right, here we go.
All right, we're back.
So here you go. So you see that red thread here? That's where I just sewed on. Okay, so I'm going to turn the template around. I'm going to flip this up, and then I'm going to turn the template back around, and I'm going to shine it to the light source just to make sure, did I cover section 2 as well as give at least a 1/4 inch around that section. So I think that looks pretty good. That's very generous. So now that I feel comfortable, that looks great, I'm going to turn the template around this way and then fold it back to where I just sewed on. I'm just going to shift my sewing machine a little bit back. Oh, I live around the corner of a firehouse, so you might hear some sirens every now and then. So I do apologize, but this is New York City. So anyway, I'm going to grab
we won't be alarmed that they're coming after you. It's not a quilting thing, right?
No. It's the ambience. It's part of the ambience. All right, so I've got my pressing mat here. Not my pressing mat. My cutting mat here, and what I'm going to do is, actually I might readjust. Can you guys see this? So I'm going to line the 1/4 inch measurement against the fold here on the paper. Do I need to adjust this, or are we all good?
No, we can see.
Okay, cool. So I'm going to get the rotary cutter, and I'm going to cut, and I've just trimmed my seam allowance, so you can see it's all nice and straight. So when you're preparing the fabric, it doesn't have to be completely perfect or straight edge, because you're going to be trimming as you go. So I'm going to fold this back. I'm going to finger press it. So you can finger press the seams as you go and then continue on with sewing the other pieces. But personally, I like to use a hot dry iron, which I'm going to bring across, and press it. And I like to press it as I go. That way it's just going to give me more of a precise and flat piecing. So I've pressed that. Oops, not going to put that near the sewing machine. There you go. So I pressed that bit. So it's looking great. I'm happy with that. So I'm going to now move on to section 3 of this template. So I'm going to be then sewing this line. So this is section 3, and I'm going to be joining it to sections 1 and 2. So when that happens, I'm going to be turning the template so the printed side is touching the table or your surface, and I'm going to fold it back to where that sewing line or that sewing guide is going to be. And you can kind of see there's that crease there. So now I want to figure out and I know this is a terrible fold, but this is an approximate. It doesn't have to be completely perfect. But anyway, so I'm going to figure out the size or cut out the piece that's going to cover section 3. So I'm going to give you that visual again. So basically I want to cut a piece that is going to be probably about this size to cover section 3. So I'm going to be using the background orange again. I'm going to grab the ruler and give me an approximate. So it's about, say, with the seam allowance, say it's probably about 3 to 4 inches big. Oh, 3 to 4 inches big. Sorry, missed the camera. There you go. So I'm going to cut a piece. And what I like about foundation paper piecing is you can use scraps from your stash and fill up bits. And because I mentioned that there is a bit of waste as well when it comes to foundation paper piecing, so you can use bits of scraps when you trim down the seam allowance and use it towards filling up smaller parts or bits of the paper template or the project that you're working on. So I think
Wendy,
this is pretty. Yes.
Someone was asking, does it matter about which way the grain line is on these pieces of fabric, or you can just cut them however you squeeze them in there?
Yeah, so it doesn't matter whichever way. And that's sort of one of the neat things about foundation paper piecing. What I've done is to ensure that when I'm sort of say quilting the project, so here's a little example of this little guy here. So what I'm worried that, sometimes, it might stretch as I'm putting the quilting lines in. So what I do is I use, what's that called? Like a fusible interfacing. So I iron it on the back of the piece. So for example, I would iron it on this side of the pieced the pieced work. So then it stops it from being manipulated when you're, when you're putting the quilting lines on. That makes sense.
That makes sense. Wonderful. Yeah. Thank you.
That's all right. That's a great question. Okay, so now I've prepared piece number 3. So I'm going to cover this section here. So I'm going to use this crease line that we made before as a guide. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the pieced section closest to my body. And I'm going to make sure that this edge is at least 1/4 of an inch above that crease line there. So it's right sides together. So right sides together here. And if you want to make sure that this section is well covered by this fabric here, which I think it is, I'm going to bring the sewing machine back. Great, you can see it. And I'm going to sew on this line here. I'll put the needle down and sew away. You don't see my hair anymore, do you?
No, you're good.
Okay, cool. I sometimes forget about that. All right, so I've done that. Okay, so just going to, before I trim the 1/4 inch seam allowance, I'm going to make sure that this piece of fabric here, section 3, covers the paper template. So I think it's looking great. It well covers that area. And so I'm going to get my cutting mat back into the camera. So I'm going to fold the paper template back. So the paper template is facing up, and I'm going to fold it back where I just sewed. Grab my quilting ruler, make sure that the 1/4 inch is right up against the fold. And I'm going to trim that and fold this back. I'm going to finger press it. And I'm going to bring my iron back in the picture, into the camera, and press away. There you go. So I've done section 3. So you notice there's quite a bit of wastage around here. So I mentioned earlier what you could do is you could roughly cut it or trim it and then use those scraps towards filling out another part of a template. So for example, this is a pretty generous sort of scrap here. So I could use that towards filling, say, maybe 2 or 3 on this other template that creates the letter Y. So I'm going to show I'm going to show this whole step again for section 4. And hopefully that will show that way you've got a good idea of how to foundation paper piece. So I'm going to make sure that the paper template is printed side is down. I'm going to fold it on the crease line that joins section 4 to the remainder of the template. And I'm going to cut out a piece of paper and fill that space. So I'm going to eyeball it again. Oops. Okay. Get my background fabric. And move this out of the way. I don't want to end up cutting it by accident. Get some fabric scissors. Angela, do you know that Tabitha, one of our brother ambassadors, designed these scissors?
She did. Tabitha's here right now. I just saw her saying hi.
Oh,
hi,
is
Tabitha.
she? Oh my God.
Yeah, she designed those scissors. I did not know that.
Yeah. I love them. They're so photogenic. All right. So I'm going to quickly press this.
Tabitha says, yes, my scissors.
Yay!
Great to see you, Tabitha.
I love them so much. All right. So we folded this crease, and we're going to use that as a guide. We're going to get this piece of fabric that we prepared for section 4, and we're going to put that long edge. So make sure that it's above, at least a 1/4 inch above that fold there. All right, and I'm going to make sure that this covers section 4, which looks pretty good to me. So it's covered that area here. All right, so I'm going to move the sewing machine close to me. Oops. And I'm going to sew that line down. Okay. Put the needle down and sew away. Sometimes it takes a little while to get used to sewing on a shorter stitch length. And it feels weird, but you get the hang of it after a lot of foundation paper piecing. All right, so I'm going to pull this out again. All right, so I'm going to make sure that this covers section 4, which is great. I think it does a great job in covering that. So what I'm going to do is trim the seam allowance. So paper template, printed side facing up, fold where you just sewed, rotary cutter, and then match the 1/4 inch measurement against the fold and cut. Turn the template over, fold it back, finger press, and then grab your hot iron and you're going to press that into place. So we just finished piecing this template and now we are going to trim it down. So we talked about this solid outline before, so we're going to cut on that solid line. So you can see that. And sometimes what I like to do is use the 1/4 inch guide on your ruler and match that against the dotted line or the line that is used to indicate the finished size of the project. So I might might move the camera so you have an overhead view of what I'm doing on the cutting mat. I'm just going to move my camera a little bit, Angela.
All right, so while she moves, that's our code word so we don't make you all sick. Seasick. Hey, by the way, Wendy, a couple people are asking, what machine are you using?
Oh, that's a great question. Before I move the everything around, I'll quickly point my camera to the machine. Yep, I'm ready to switch. All right.
There you go.
That's the machine I'm using, and that is the BQ3100 from the Quilt Club series. And it's a great machine. One thing I really love, and I always talk about it, you guys are probably sick and tired of hearing it, is the Sew Straight Laser Vision Guide. Did you just see? Actually, no, I might have to move my camera again for that. Hang on. See that? So that laser guide here, that's really cool when it comes to creating binding strips, or if you're doing flying pieces or snowball units, because you then don't have to end up drawing guidelines. All right, I'm gonna switch back to you, Angela, while I set up my camera again.
All right, so while you're setting up, just a few more questions for you. Do you do a back stitch at the beginning and end of each of those stitches by any chance, or do you just sew off?
That's a great question. And that's one thing I wanted to tell you guys, but I forgot about it. So that is a great question. So you can do a back stitch at the beginning and the end of the seam for additional enforcement. But because you're working with a really small stitch length already, I think you're generally pretty good. And so doing the reverse stitch at the beginning and end is not really necessary.
Okay, great. And what stitch length? Someone popped in late and asked what stitch length you're using as well.
Yeah, so I am currently on my machine. I used 1.2. Sometimes I set it as 1.4. Going back to that question about whether you back stitch or not at the beginning, at the end of the seam. So like, say for like shorter sort of seams here, I tend to use a shorter stitch length. So then that way it kind of creates more enforcement there. Same with this one, like this is like a tiny sort of stitch between 1 and 2. So I use a smaller stitch length for that. Hopefully that answers your question. Yeah. All right, so I have finished piecing my template here. So now I'm going to trim it. So I'm going to get my ruler, and I use this dotted line here as a guide and as well, and match that 1/4 inch from the outer line. And I like to use the rotating cutting mat here, just so that I don't have to pick up my paper template or my piece template as I'm making the cuts. Because when you're picking up the paper template as you go and you're cutting, you might sort of like move things around and it's not as accurate, but it's a nice to have. You don't have to have it to get those nice straight lines. Okay, so I've cut all that excess around the template. This looks pretty good. So by the way, this is the bottom half of the letter Y for the Hebrew bunting. Anyway, so this is the fun part. So I get to tear this all away. And you know how I mentioned earlier that it doesn't matter if the template or the pieces of fabric that you prepared is all jagged, because you're going to end up trimming the excess, and you've got these really nice seam allowances on the back, and it's all nice and flat. And wow, there you go. That's how you foundation paper piece. All right, I'm happy to switch back to my other camera.
So, Wendy, I have to just say, wow, because you demonstrated that so well. At first I was thinking, how are you going to get those seam allowances in there? Until you see it, you explained it so well. Now I understand.
Yeah, I know. Like the first bit was kind of boring. Like it was just all focusing on the paper. But I think once you understand how the paper templates work, like everything just comes together and it makes sense. So if foundation paper piecing is not your jam, I have a couple of other alternatives for Halloween or holiday bunting, or maybe bunting for a child or a baby's room. So you can play around with different shapes on, say, Microsoft Word. So like maybe you want to have like bunting triangles and get out stencils from there. And then you can maybe use your scan and cut and then print out letters and then stick it on or sew it on. So this Halloween bunting, I use like adhesive felt and then just stuck it on. And there I got Halloween bunting.
Absolutely gorgeous. Absolutely gorgeous. So Wendy, just a few people are asking, is this a free pattern or can they go to your website, or why don't you tell them a little bit about, because you also have a book coming out in the spring that I want to give a little teaser for.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, so the first question about the pattern. So the Hey Boo and the Halloween bunting and this stars and stripes bunting, I actually got it the other way around. So the stars and then these stripes here, hopefully you can see them. They're also foundation paper pieced. But yeah, they are available on my website for purchase. So it's the-weekendquilter.com. I think it would have come down on the subtitles just then as well. And then as for the book that, my second book, it's going to be coming out on January the 24th. And it is called The Quilted Home Handbook.
Oh, that's going to be very exciting. So I put her, you can see her website down below scrolling, along with the Brother Sew's website, which you all, if you're new here, you want to go visit there because you can see all the great products that Brother has. There's also links to embroidery and all those things. So this is super, super cool. I see some people saying, so great to see you, Wendy. So Wendy is our official quilting ambassador at Brother. That is definitely, and you've earned that name for sure.
Why, thank you. Also, we're going to be at the Houston International Quilt Festival between November 3rd and I believe November 6th, which is a Thursday to Sunday. So drop by the All Brands booth. Be sure to say hi to us. If you have any questions related to your sewing machine, or if you're looking for a new machine, be sure to be there and know that they have some really awesome deals going on.
So actually, Wendy, I was just like writing something about that because some friends were asking, when are you guys going to be there? So we will be there, and it's in Houston. The Quilt Fest is amazing. There are so many quilts there that was my first chance to see how beautiful quilts really are. I mean, I had a few like in my past from my grandmother and stuff, but once you go to the Houston Quilt Fest, your eyes open up to, I just call it art. It's absolutely amazing. But yeah, we're both going to be in the All Brands booth along with some other brother ambassadors and brother educators. And they have a stage there. It's booth 1208. But if you get confused, it's 1108, 1208, 1308. It's the whole front row. I think we're going to take over.
I'm so excited for it. I can't. Yeah. Oh, sorry. Go on.
No, it's so much fun. And if you want to find more information about that, because all the great brother products are going to be there, we're very excited to show that off. You can go to allbrands.com/quiltfest and you'll see the whole demo stage. I know you'll be demoing on stage. I'm going to be demoing the Luminaire XP3. The new serger, the air thread serger is going to be there, the airflow. It's going to be just amazing. So I will be there Thursday, Friday, Saturday. What days are you going to be there, Wendy?
I'm going to be Thursday to Saturday as well.
Okay. But the Quilt Fest is actually open Wednesday to Sunday. So you'll probably catch us roaming through on Wednesday because that's when we kind of go take a sneak peek of what's going on. So you won't want to miss it. And also, All Brands is hosting a Wolfpack meet and greet at 11:30 each day. So come over, get photos with all of us. And they're doing a special giveaway, which is amazing. So I can't hardly wait. Can you believe we fly out like a week from tomorrow? Whoa.
I know. It's so hard to believe.
Time flies, but this is one of my favorite events of the year. I'm so excited. So any last minute questions for Wendy on the paper piecing? Someone said, oh, great. I agree, Susie. Great tutorial. Great tutorial. Anne says, congrats on the book. I agree with that too.
Thank you.
Yeah, you know, the scan and cut would be useful here. I agree.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone's saying, hey, maybe next year, Delia, we'd love to see you. Excellent tutorial. I totally agree. Now, some of you said, can I watch this again? Absolutely. So we will be not live in a few minutes, but we were live. You can watch the replay if you're on Facebook. The easiest way is to share it to your page. That's the easiest way to find these videos. Again, if you're on YouTube, be sure to subscribe to Brother Channel and you'll never miss a live show, but you can also go back and watch this. And last, of course, but not least, if you're making something with your brother machine, your brother scan and cut, look above, use hashtag brother scan and cut and hashtag brother sews. They love to see what you're working on and you never know, they might feature you on their page. All right, everyone. Wendy, this was an awesome tutorial. You completely opened my eyes to what paper piecing was. I could never really wrap my head around I could not wrap my head around where those seam allowances were coming from. You made it so simple. And now I understand what it is. And I thank you for that. And I think a lot of other people do too. I see some light bulbs going off in the audience.
Yeah, I might convert you guys. If you have any questions as well, be sure you can also DM me on Instagram at @the.weekendquilter as well.
Fantastic. Wendy, thank you so much. I'll see you next week. And
Thank you.
Thanks for letting us take over your page. Till next time, happy sewing, happy quilting.
Bye.